Hello, good morning and welcome. It's Tuesday, October the 28th, and today Labour has sunk in the polls to its lowest ever level, recorded by YouGov since records began. My name is Sam Coates of Sky News.
And I'm Anne McElvoy from Politico. Welcome to Politics at Sam and Anne's, the briefing that gives you everything you need to know in around 20 minutes. And from where we sit, there's more pain to come for the government as the budget gets even harder because that black hole is getting even bigger. But first, those numbers, Sam.
That's right. We're going to look at pain on a number of different fronts. The polling in just a second, but on the domestic front, there's some pain. And there's a mouse running round, and Bob the cat is in the garden. And it might be the case that we suddenly have to stop this recording. I am not joking. I hate mice.
I feel I need to respond to that, Sam Coates. Can you not train that cat to deal with the mouse? I mean, this is basic politics.
At this stage in life, I think Bob is in charge and we are merely characters in his drama. I'm going to plough on with the weekly YouGov Sky News Times voting intention poll. Reform UK remain top on 27%. They're up one on the week. The Tories are on 17%. That's no change on the week. But Labour are down 3 percentage points, and they are the same as the Tories, also on 17%. And here's another shock result. The Greens are up 1 percentage point on 16, so 1 percentage point behind Labour. Lib Dems on 15. Right. According to YouGov, that 17% figure for Labour is, they believe, the lowest that they have shown them on record. And the Green score is their highest. Now, needless to say, it's an unusual result for four of the main five parties to be within 2 percentage points of each other. And I suppose, Anne, we could be in a world fairly soon where the Greens are polling ahead of Labour. I almost feel like there's a slice of the electorate that's always been there, but's been waiting for a party like the Greens to come along, and now under their new leader, Zach Polansky, that they have formed into something that a sort of left-leaning slice of the electorate are happy to vote for. What do you make of all those results?
It certainly shows the splintering of the traditional political landscape really clearly, doesn't it, Sam? I mean, when we were talking at the end of last week about Liz Truss predicting to me that Greens could conceivably be the main opposition because people were fed up, as she put it, with this technocratic managerial crap. Sorry about the crap word so early. But that was it seemed like a bit of an out there prediction. But when you look at these numbers, well, stranger things have happened because there are the Greens sitting in the high teens alongside the Tories and Labour. Of course, we are really far out from big choices that people will have to make at a general election. For Tories and Labour, well, you could say even Stevenson in some ways, it seems to me easier headline there for Kerry Badenoch. It's floor-scrapingly low for the Conservatives. But she can say both main parties are affected. We're seeing this fragmenting, and try to kind of set a strategy around that. The uncomfortable takeaway, I would say, for her is that if you add the Tories to that reform tally, you start to get a more interesting bloc on the right, which I think is maybe something some people around her, Mr. Robert Jenrick, etc., might be quite keen to look into if reform can't get above 30%. If you're the government, how are you going to respond to this? We've heard David Lammy trying to rally backbenchers last night, telling them progressives can come back from these bad stats and win. Wes Streeting, something must be done, everybody is saying. But do they really agree what that something should be to get out of this poll nadir for the government?
Right. I've got another set of numbers, Anne, because we're going into budget discussions today. And over the weekend, I got YouGov to ask how much the public trust each of the five national parties on the economy. Now, I'm about to do the results. You could go big on the fact that Labour is the least trusted of the five main parties, but as you listen to the numbers, it's only by a whisker. And I think the much bigger point is that all the results are within the margin of error. So the public see them all the same. So here we go. 24% of the public say they trust the Tories. 24% of the public say they trust reform. 24% of the public trust the Liberal Democrats. 22% trust the Greens. And 21% trust Labour. So all five parties within 3 points of each other. I suppose that's why British politics feels like there's all to play for at the moment, Anne.
Yeah, it's interesting, isn't it? Those trust figures, how low they are. But basically, people simply trust the group of people, seems to me it tracks fairly strongly what the figures were like that we read out at the top, the percentage figures. So trust ratings, I don't think, play particularly well for any one party over another, although it's something that pollsters are keen on measuring because it shows a bit more of a kind of gut instinct as well as what policies or special interests people feel are represented. It does feel it leaves everything to play for, in the sense that any of those parties, say perhaps Reform has already chosen its core territory in which it wants to fight, but you could see any of these parties sitting here saying that we're in with a chance here to have a big boost, just deciding to go for one topic or another, you go big or go home. And I think that's what makes the budget so important for Labour. What is it going to try to say with this budget, as opposed to just moving some of the limited funding around the system? And I think there have been a number of big updates that you've had your ear to the ground about.
That's right. Let's go through the big budget developments. We're now less than a month away from possibly the biggest political moment of the year. Right. Yesterday, while in Saudi Arabia, Rachel Reeves announced what listeners to this podcast should already know, which is basically a bit of a mea culpa, that she's going to have to leave a much bigger gap in future between her projected spending plans and her self-imposed borrowing limits. This is our old friend, headroom caused by those fiscal rules that she has. She's twice been caught out by having just £10 billion of headroom, and then worse economic news and the need for more money to spend on stuff has meant that her sort of margin for error was diminished. So yesterday in the desert, she pledged that she would have bigger headroom after this budget. But of course, bigger headroom means finding yet more cash, largely through tax rises, in the budget.
Like when you say in Rachel Reeves in the desert, it probably feels like 40 days and 40 nights of great austerity in terms of what the Chancellor has got at her disposal. And not great news when she looks at her Financial Times today. That paper is reporting she's going to be hit by a bigger than expected downgrade to UK productivity forecasts. Analysts say that blow to public finances could be more than 20 billion. The Office for Budget Responsibility was expecting a downgrade on trend productivity growth by about 0.1 or 0.2%. The FT is saying that this is going to be more like 0.3% lower, and that would create a 21 billion black hole. So the one thing we know about this black hole is that every time we talk about it on the podcast, it seems like magically to have got bigger. It's like the phantom toll booth of black holes. What do you make of it, Sam?
The first thing to say is, having been a veteran of quite a few budgets, I wouldn't be surprised if that story on the front page of the Financial Times comes gently from the direction of the Treasurer, or at least with a nod of approval, because ever since the mini budget, Chancellors have not wanted to surprise the markets or the public where possible. And so we know more about budgets in advance than we ever have done before. And this feels like part of a programmed rollout of information that we are getting, some of which has been on the record by the Chancellor yesterday in the desert about headroom, some of which is done through leaks to newspapers. So don't colour me surprised if that is a semi-authorised piece by the FT. But then you put all the numbers together, Anne, and think of it like this. So that downgrade on productivity, that's a black hole of 21 billion. She's going to have to increase headroom further. So that's another 5 to 10 billion. And then she's got to find £10 billion to pay for those welfare policy U-turns, including reinstating winter fuel payments. And then she's got to find some money to lift the 2-child cap. And there's also talk about helping with energy bills. We are looking at a black hole of 35 to 40 billion pounds when you put all those different elements together. For 35 to 40 billion pounds. That is the same scale of tax rises that we had in last October's budget. It's absolutely massive. And look, I'm not naive. There is an element of expectation setting. So on the day they can say it's less bad than you think, but even accounting for early expectation setting, and there is now less than a month to go, and the Treasury hasn't been given its final fixed forecast, we're heading for something so incredibly painful. I'm not sure even yet most of the political machine is braced for what's about to hit it.
Yeah, I must say, when you made that point about it being something of the order of magnitude that we faced last year in the budget, or the country faced, that was then put down to, this is what one go and we'll be in the clear. We'll be able to just storm ahead with our government prospectus. I mean, you actually did bring me up sharp a bit there, Polly. I suppose everybody suddenly thinks yikes about their personal finances, but I think you're right. I think the emotional impact of this budget, and you're pointing out that there's been a pitch rolling and preparation going on, but I think there's also that sense that the Chancellor knows she needs to prepare for quite a backlash that is going to come from those affected, and also very reasonably from people saying, well, you got yourself into this position with the way that you set those fiscal rules and that unwisely low headroom. Rishi Sunak was pointing that out in his first column in the Sunday Times, and I thought he did it in very reasonable terms, just saying, you can't go on like this because you just don't have, you'll have to somehow get that headroom back, otherwise you're just going to reel from one kind of disaster big fiscal event to another. So that's the scale of the management challenge that Rachel Reeves and therefore Keir Starmer and the rest of the government are looking at. What are they going to do about it?
Got a little bit of intel for listeners of this podcast, right? Remember, a budget is more or less finalised 2 weeks out from the date that it's delivered. So we really are in the business end of people making the key decisions. Right. The first thing I know is that we're not yet at a stage where they can rule out breaking the manifesto. I'm probably not talking about income tax, but there were quite an extensive set of manifesto promises, and they are still keeping open the option of breaking them. They just haven't got to the stage where they can definitively say that's not happening. So that's pretty massive. And I think that reflects the mega scale of the challenge. The second is there's a lot of thought, I think, going on about how this budget will be perceived. Of course there is, because it's going to be massive. And they're very conscious, I think, inside government that last year it looked as if the Treasury mandarins took control, and whether it was winter fuel payments or something else, that was the wrong approach. And instead they're going to have to come back with what looks like a much greater strategy. So that's their logic as to why they're actually going to have to spend money at the budget too, that, doing things like lifting the 2-child poverty cap. But the third thing I've picked up, and this is something I've been hunting for a while, and I may have found it now actually, is we've been puzzling over the government's definition of working people. Keir Starmer says that he is for working people and wants to protect working people, but it's unclear whether he meant working people at the upper end of the scale, whether he meant working people in unusual tax arrangements. Right. Well, finally, I've got a definition of what some people in government think working people actually means. And it's a definition I think that they're working around in the Treasury. Working people in the first instance means the lower 2/3 of earners. Lower 2/3 of earners, right? So if Treasury officials are being told to protect the bottom 2/3, who does that exclude? Well, I was doing some research this morning, and the top third of UK earners starts at, it depends on your age, but starts very roughly at £45,000 a year and higher. So people earning more than that, well, doesn't sound like you're going to be protected. People earning less than that, well, I think that's who at the moment the Treasury wants to help to protect.
That's fascinating, because I'm also wondering how you get round the fact that working people who earn marginally above that 36K or thereabouts, or who just by virtue of the way that their earnings interact with the tax system could say quite rightly and loudly, and others will say it for them in the media, that this isn't what you said at the beginning. You said no taxes on working people. It didn't say, please read the small print while we go ahead and redefine who we think working people are. So I wonder whether, that is obviously something that they feel that that's the way they're going to gate this decision, Sam, to protect those earners. But you can see an almighty row following about whether effectively there was a breach of the promise, don't you think?
I think there is all sorts of pitfalls in this. I'm not a champion for their strategy. I'm merely a reporter of it. And I spy many dangers ahead. One of the things that's going on is that the government is trying to push its ability to get economic growth going overseas, as well as at home. What do you make of those efforts with the visit to Turkey and the visit to Riyadh by the two principals of the government?
Yes, Turkey, Riyadh, coming after that big Indian jamboree visit that you took part in there, Sam, to report. One of the things that really strikes me is that there is a parallel global Britain push while all this planning for the budget and the domestic misery front is in full flourish at home. Global Britain is probably going a bit better. That deal on Turkey, it's an £8 billion jets deal with Turkey, or Turkey, as Keir Starmer referenced it politely to oblige his hosts. He's in the Northwest selling that today. Now, it's a very good example, this, of something that's good defence posture for the UK and for NATO and binding Turkey into NATO, and the UK playing a positive role there. But it's also intended to be money coming in. And if you look at the way that the government is framing its communications about this, it's about jobs. It's about that 8 billion coming down the line, I think, for 20 jets, at least in the first instance. The problem with all of this is these things just take far longer to come on stream than the problem that they're trying to solve. In this case, it's around 2030. Ditto, we've got Rachel Reeves. She's off at Davos in the desert, so-called. And I'm told she's about to speak about the UK as a haven of regulatory stability, welcoming investors from across the Gulf, despite what she is politely calling divergence and cultural differences, meaning the difficulties of dealing with autocracies and the more repressive side of the Saudi regime, even though they are her hosts. There's a massive diplomatic flurry, Sam, coming up with senior members of the royal family from the kingdom about to show up in the UK for various meetings in November. So something is moving there. But here's the reality check. Even if that goes across the line, it's about comes on stream a bit quicker, obviously, than the Turkey deal. 1.6 billion on the table. Well, nice to have, but not going to solve anything like the headaches and the sums that you're pointing out Rachel Reeves is addressing in this very difficult budget.
That is fascinating. Right. Just to make sure that everyone has everything they need for the day ahead, we're going to quickly, in the last 90 seconds, touch on one more story. I think the government are quite keen to sell a story on the front page of the Times. It's a Home Office story. Happy birthday, Jamie. Here we go. Small boat migrants will be housed in 2 army barracks in Scotland and the south of England from next month, the Times tells us. A total of 900 migrants will be housed under plans to use Cameron Barracks in Inverness and Crowborough Army Training Camp in East Sussex. Now, this, in the recesses of my mind, Anne, I seem to remember a time where Labour was in favour of not using army barracks to house asylum seekers. Can you shed any light on that?
Well, exactly. Let's not forget that was the Labour position. This was inhumane, it was inefficient, etc. But Playbook is also reporting on this. Has got some interesting detail today, pointing out that shift about using military barracks has been coming on since the summer, partly just because of the generally bad public mood about asylum hotels. It's very clear that Keir Starmer wants an expedited timeline on ending the use of that. So at the moment, you come down to facilities which can house a lot of people in fairly basic conditions, but can hit welfare standards that would be acceptable. And I think Labour is very conscious of that the use of things like barracks, is going to get an adverse response, certainly from some Labour members and some MPs. But it also sounds like they're going to try to build some new infrastructure, the acquisition of more sustainable dispersal accommodation, temporary facilities, etc. I mean, whatever the modern speak is for porter cabins or things like that. Now, the reason that this could be a bit of a trap for Labour is that I gather from talking to people who try to handle this under the Tories that this use change, even if you try to change the use of a barracks from one thing to another, is often more expensive than building from scratch. And the Public Accounts Committee, Sam, will have a very close eye on that after the cost fiasco on the asylum hotels we covered yesterday. So you've got the symbolism. Keir Starmer wants these asylum seekers housed elsewhere, but how do you house them quickly, cheaply and humanely without ramping up another bill, which then comes back to bite you? That still looks like a challenge.
Our use case, Anne, is to do a podcast in 20 minutes. And if we try to change that, there will be a lot of questions to answer from the relevant committee. So we cannot go on any further. That is where we have to draw down the shutters. Thank you very much indeed for everything. Today we'll be back for Wednesday's Politics and Sam and Anne's, PMQs and all the rest. See you tomorrow, Anne. I'm very pleased to say no mouse emerged, so I'm going to get out of here as quickly as I can.
You do sound remarkably relieved about that. Maybe the cat has been doing its thing.
Hey, it's Sophie and Will from Sky News.
Too many headlines, too little time?
We get it, and that's why we're bringing you Cheat Sheet.
10 minutes every weekday morning.
All the big stories from politics to pop culture, minus the noise.
No doom scrolling, no spin, just the stories that matter from two people who live and breathe the news. Cheat Sheet with Ridge and Frost from Sky News.
Follow Cheat Sheet wherever you get your podcasts.